Hey guys, Richard Holdener here, and welcome to the channel. This is a very common question. Hey Richard, what is the best camshaft for my LS? What are the best cylinder heads for my LS? And for this video, what is the best intake manifold for my LS? Well, to find the answer, quick, let's head to the dyno. In this video, we're going to find out what the best intake manifold is for your cathedral port LS application, and I'll give you a little spoiler. The best intake manifold for your application might not actually be the best intake manifold for somebody else's application. You see, intake manifolds are basically RPM specific. The different intake designs determine where the different intake manifolds optimize power production. You may want your power down low, somebody else will want their power up top. But here's the thing, we are going to show you what the best intake manifold is, assuming that your idea of the best intake manifold is the one that makes the most average power, at least over the given RPM range that we tested them in. But here's the hitch. That intake manifold also costs money, so only you can decide whether those gains are worth the cost of that manifold to make it the best. Before we get to our data, I want you guys to check out a couple things I have up on the channel. First of all, I've got playlists for any different engine family. I've got lots of LS stuff, including NA and turbocharged stuff, and I have those broken down for small block Chevy, big block Chevy, Hemi, modular Ford, Honda. There's turbo stuff, blower stuff, nitro stuff. There's all kinds of stuff, so anything that you're looking for, including the other guys where I run the Buick and the Cadillac and the 4.3 liter small little LT1 stuff. So check all that stuff out. But I wanted to cover 5 different videos that I want you guys to take a look at, because I thought that they were really cool and they deserve a second look. The first one is how to maximize power out of your 6-liter. So check out that video. I'm going to put a link up right here. If you want to know how to modify your 6-liter and how to get maximum power out of it, check out that video. Video number 2 is a comparison between a 5.3 liter LS and a 5.4 liter 4-valve modular Ford, both NA and boosted. So good stuff. So which one's better, the 5.3 or the 5.4? Check it out. That video is going to be right here. The third video I want you to take a look at is how to cure low oil pressure on my particular vehicle, which was a 2002 Silverado. The oil pressure started getting low. So check out what happened and what I went through to try to cure the low oil pressure blues. That video is going to be right here. Number 4, we're going to take a look at on my 5-liter Ford, guys. Would you rather modify your 5-liter 302 or maybe swap something else into it like a 351? Hard choice, but that video is right here. And the final one, number 5, is going to be my turbo test. It is a low buck, cheap turbo test run on a K24A2 Honda motor. So I ran a variety of different turbos. You can check out all of that stuff right here. Now let's get to those results. To illustrate what the best intake manifold is for your cathedral port LS, we're going to take a look at a number of different intake manifolds to figure out which one actually is the best. Now the problem with it being the best is the term best is actually subjective. For me, the best manifold oftentimes is the one that you already have, simply because you don't have to spend a whole bunch of extra money to get something else or something different. You already have this. For instance, if you go to the wrecking yard and pick up an LS, a 4.8, a 5.3, or a 6.0, it already comes with an intake. It already comes with a pretty good intake. The early truck manifold works very, very well. So you get good power from it. It's got good runner length. It's got good average power production. It does a lot of good stuff. But there are intake manifolds that make a little bit more power. So the question isn't which one is better. It's more your definition of better. Some of them make more power, but are you willing to spend the extra money for whatever power you get? And that's why we do these dyno tests, to figure out how much power it is, and you guys can determine, is it worth it? The other thing to think about, and we'll see that here, is what happens if you get a little bit more power on the top and a little bit less power at the bottom? Is that trade-off worth it? What is your definition of best? Is best more power on the top, but you don't mind sacrificing the stuff down low? Is best only that it makes more power everywhere? What is your definition of best? But let's show you some different intake manifolds, and I can show you what I'm talking about here. This is a 6-liter, a modified 6-liter. It had forged internals, CP Carrillo bullet stuff, flat top pistons, valve reliefs. It had a healthy camshaft in it. It was the the Comp 54 469-11 camshaft. I'll go ahead and put the specs up here. By now, guys that have watched the channel should be used to seeing that camshaft and should already know what it does. This one had a set of Airflow Research CNC ported heads on it because we wanted the motor to be able to take advantage of what all of these intake manifolds had to offer. Now, obviously, you won't get these kinds of power gains on a milder or a stockish motor. But again, if you want to see how much power these intake manifolds are worth, put them on a motor that can utilize everything that they have to offer. So we ran this thing with long tube headers and a Holley HP management system. Everything was dialed in. This is for our big intake test. But it helps show what these manifolds are worth, and when you go to choose the different ones, what you can kind of expect. So this is with the early truck manifold. On our 6-liter, this thing made 549 horsepower, good power on a 6-liter, 481 foot-pounds. So you might be thinking, well, yeah, that's a truck manifold. What happens if I had like an LS6 or the Dorman LS6, that kind of thing? You can see here in red that the LS6 is worth a little bit more power, but it costs a little bit power down low, down below 3,900, picks up power from about 56 or 5,700. The difference isn't dramatic. It's up to 557 horsepower. Peak torque was identical because here in this range where peak torque occurs, they made identical power curves. So there's not a lot of gain to be expected by an LS6 manifold, although the LS6 manifold might fit in lower hood applications where the standard truck manifold will not. So now let's take a look. Well, okay, what about the Trailblazer SS? We know the Trailblazer SS is better than even the LS6 manifold. Here's the Trailblazer SS, and this is the kind of thing where you say, okay, if I'm looking for the best, this would be an easy definition of best, because a Trailblazer SS manifold made more power than either the LS6 or the early truck manifold, and it made more power everywhere, from our start, even a little bit below 3,000, all the way out past 7,000. So the Trailblazer SS is a good performance truck manifold or any kind of manifold, as long as it will fit. Just like the early truck manifold, there might be some applications, hood clearance applications, where the Trailblazer manifold doesn't really fit very well. But as you can see here, it offers good power gains equipped with the Trailblazer SS intake. Power output was up to 562 horsepower. Peak torque jumped up to 497 foot-pounds of torque. So the Trailblazer SS is a good manifold, and the one that would be the equivalent of this, if you wanted it to fit, is the Dorman LS2 intake manifold. That makes an identical power curve to the Trailblazer SS. It has a good size throttle body opening, and it also fits because it is a lower profile. Now let's take a look at some other intake manifolds. Now that we've taken a look at some of the factory offerings comparing to the factory truck intake manifold to the LS6 and the Trailblazer SS, let's take a look at some of the aftermarket intake manifolds that guys go to. And here is our factory early truck manifold, 549 horsepower, 481 foot-pounds. How does this compare to, say, something like a Holley high ram? Let's take a look. And as we can see, this Holley high ram basically is a tunnel ram style intake manifold. It's very popular with guys running forced induction, although if we take a look here, it's not really a forced induction manifold. It's just a manifold designed for a different engine speed. And the reason for that is the high ram has fairly short runners compared to the factory truck manifold or compared to the Trailblazer SS or really any of these. So the shorter runners are going to tend to enhance power production at a higher engine speed. In this case, above 5,900 RPM, the Holley made quite a bit more than the truck manifold. Peak power was up to 586 horsepower, but you can see that peak torque actually dropped some. Peak torque on the Holley was 470 foot-pounds. In fact, from 57 or 5,800 and below, the factory truck manifold made more power than the high ram, but the reason that guys choose the high ram for these drag race applications and for turbo applications is because they're running more engine speed. So if you're running your motor from, let's say, 5,500 to 7,500 or even beyond that, the high ram is kind of the obvious choice. You know, it's going to take a little bit to get it going, but in most cases for a drag race application, they're kind of traction limited initially anyway. So they can get these turbos to spool up. They can get the RPM up. You can have a converter that flashes fairly high with a turbo application. So this is not as much of a problem on a drag strip as it is driving around and, every day where you might want to use the extra torque that comes from down low. But in the RPM range where you're running at the drag strip, the high ram works very well, which is why guys choose it. You're up 30, 40 horsepower compared to a truck manifold, let's say, and it works very well at that extended RPM range. But here's something important to note. That's not the only option. And since we're looking at this, 71, 7200 RPM, here is another option for that RPM range. So this is a fast LSXRT, and for you guys thinking, well, that's the truck style manifold, it is. It just means it has a bigger plenum. The fast LSXR and the LSXRT made almost identical power curves. So the change in the shape of the plenum had very little effect on power because the runner lengths were basically the same. But as we can see, the fast manifold made not only a lot more power than the truck style manifold, more than the Trailblazer SS, more than the LS6, more than any of those. Peak power is up to 591 horsepower. But the important thing is peak torque was up as well, over 500 foot-pounds, 502 foot-pounds of torque. In fact, it was better than the factory manifold everywhere. And by a substantial amount, as we can see here. But the other thing to think about is if you compare it to the high ram, in this range up to 7,200 RPM, the fast manifold was better even than the short ram, than the short runner high ram everywhere. So if you're running a motor from 70, in this case 7,200 and below, the best manifold is the fast manifold. Now then you have to decide, yes, it's worth this much more power. But is that much more power worth whatever the fast manifold costs? In this case, it might be somewhere near $1,000. So is that power gain worth that price? But for something in the 7,000 RPM and less range, it's really, really hard to beat. On a cathedral port application, it's hard to beat that fast manifold. And this same thing would happen under boost. So under boost, this fast manifold at any given boost level would make more power than all of these other manifolds. There isn't really a turbo manifold. Manifolds are designed to operate effectively at a given RPM range, and for this RPM range, there's really nothing better than the fast. And this holds true whether it's a 4.8, a 5.3, a 6.0, and even we've run these on strokers. And what happens is on the smaller displacement motors, we can actually extend the advantage RPM range out on the smaller motor. And then, the exact opposite happens when we go up in displacement is the crossover point for some of these shorter runner manifolds like the high ram actually come back. So on a 408, for instance, the fast might be really good up to about 6,500. But then beyond that, the shorter runner manifolds are actually going to make a little bit more power, but they're still going to lose power in this RPM range below 6,500 on a stroker. So again, which power combination do you want? What RPM range are you running? Pick your intake manifold accordingly. Okay guys, what did we learn from this little adventure running a bunch of different intake manifolds on our cathedral port 6-liter LS? Well, we learned the following thing. First of all, there are a lot of good intake manifolds available for the LS application, starting with the one that came with the motor. If you go to the wrecking yard and pick up a 4.8, a 5.3, or a 6-liter, it already comes with a pretty decent intake manifold. That early truck manifold works very well, and let's face it, it was free, it came with the motor. That right there might make it the best intake. But there are a lot of good upgrades for that. Take a look at the LS6 or the Trailblazer SS. If you want to stay with the factory engine family intake manifolds, those work very well and they're fairly affordable. But if you want to go even more, if you want to gain even more power, there are also aftermarket upgrades. If you want to run high RPM, something like the short runner HOLLEY high ram works very well. Or in our case, in our 7,000 RPM and below operating range, we saw that the fast manifold worked very well and actually offered the most average power production of any of the manifolds. So we know it works very well, but there's a hitch. It's not free. That's right, the fast manifold costs money, so only you can decide whether or not the gains offered by it justify the cost of the manifold to make it the best intake manifold. I'm Richard Holder. Make sure to like, share, subscribe, ring the bell, do all that stuff. More testing coming up.